Hey, what's up? This is Letswritetonight. I'm still working on Deepriver and the Shadows of Lordaeron. I'm just getting repositioned here so that I can watch some stuff happening while I'm doing that. This Friday was a long time coming for me. Long week. What's the gist of the lore you're writing? So this is based on my Tauren Death Knight, and it's his origin story. Or it sort of dabbles in his origin story. The gist is that this character joins a elite Forsaken unit because they're the only ones who accept him for being a Death Knight. And so, in the process of joining this military unit, he finds he doesn't fit in there either. And so, it kicks off like this multi-story arc epic where Sal'journ's on this, effectively a journey to return home. The Shadows, the Forsaken of the Shadows of Lordaeron, are learning to find purpose in their immortal lives. And then Zeko, who's the big bad in the story, he doesn't really learn anything, right? Because he's the villain. But we sort of, what I'm going to dabble in for him is what unbridled ambition looks like. And so, yeah, hold on one sec. Effectively, Sal'journ learns that the story is not about him, or like living isn't about him. It's not really what he does with his immortality. It's what you do for others. And so it's not a sappy story. I do want there to be some lessons in it. So. Oh. So he would have been like a first generation Death Knight then from oh gosh, what was that orc's name who starts with an N? No? What was that guy's name? Now it's bugging me. Ner'zhul, that was his name. Oh, interesting. I like that idea of refusing to use darker magic too. Yeah, a lot of Death Knights, they'll roleplay like, you know, it's the classic edgelord. And for them, they'll make it so that their characters don't remember what their lives were like before they became a Death Knight. I wrote Sal completely the opposite. I wrote Sal so that he only remembers his waking life, because as a Death Knight in the Scourge, you know, he was possessed. It wasn't him doing those things that the Lich King had him doing. So for him, literally the way the prelude opens for his story is he wakes up after the Lich King is killed. He wakes up in the middle of a slaughter, and he's leading this undead army behind him. But he kind of just snaps out of it, and it's just, you know, he's back to Sal'journ, the plague shifter of the Cenarian Circle, decked out in plate armor and a rune sword. Yeah, Mary Sue's, you gotta watch out for that. No, yeah, so Sal's story is he's basically one of the Scourge captains. Like, you fight Scourge Captain Tauren in oh my gosh, what's the name of the thing? Hold on. It's been so long since I've said these words out loud, it like stumps me now. It's gonna come rushing back as soon as I see it. Yeah, Naxxramas. So right, he's in Eastern Plaguelands, but he's a Scourge captain, separate from like the heroes that kill the Lich King. And when the Lich King dies, he loses his grip on the Scourge. But the way Death Knights are built, right, they retain a level of free will, so they're not totally dominated. And that's what makes them so dangerous. They have a will and a desire to cause pain, right? It just so happens he didn't gain his free will during the Light's Hope chapel. Mm-hmm. And the way I haven't built into this character Sal's need to cause pain. And I think I'm debating if I'm going to keep it that way because he's a Tauren, and so their innate peaceful nature kind of overrides that. Or if he's going to have some sort of outlet for it. What I am going to do is make it so that when he is killing things or he is being violent, he like loses control. And he ends up becoming this like runaway train that the rest of the shadows of the gang have to get like away from him, because he's effectively like a weapon of mass destruction when he's just completely absorbed in what he's doing, right? Yeah, I'll have to think about the outlet, because the way I have him written right now, he's only very violent because he's trying to fit in with the shadows, and he loses control when he's doing that. Eventually he gets that under control later on in the story. I'd have to really think about how to build in that innate, I don't even know what you want to call it. It's not really, rage isn't the word. But it's also something that I don't know that I necessarily... It's like a topic about Death Knights I want to allude to, but I don't necessarily feel the need to show it. Like, for instance, I'm going to talk about the Ebon Blade in this story. Yeah, Bloodlust. I'm going to talk about the Ebon Blade in this story because one of the shadows recognizes Sal'journ from his Scourge days as the one who killed her. And so she's going to hate him for that and signal to the Ebonblade that there's a vagrant Death Knight in their midst, and like gets them to come collect him or kill him, right? And that'll have like a small confrontation, but will allude to in that scene the Death Knights are trying to control your vagrant Death Knights because of the chaos that they cause when they're not under control. But that's way later in the story. I'm not anywhere near that right now. What are these guys doing? I was wrapping up this chapter here. If I write this weekend, I might be able to finish it. But tonight, I think I'm going to try to just... We got this. Got that. Okay. I don't know. I might be able to finish this chapter tonight. Let's see how we do here. How would you intend on using that? So there's a Titan prison. And he was going to imprison himself as like isolation, like a quarantine. Interesting. That's a good idea. I didn't even think of using like WoW holidays in the story. That'd be pretty fun. That's funny. And I haven't done any time walking. I need to get on that. I think that's a great idea. Definitely. A lot of World of Warcraft is so much unexplored lore. Seriously, my hope is to wrap up this story, package it, find an agent, a literary agent that'll represent me, and to pitch it to Blizzard. And literally my underlying pitch is you have so much unexplored lore and people are so desperate for like a 2D animated series exploring World of Warcraft in more depth than just your main characters. Stories like what you're talking about, like the origins of certain holidays, like that would make such a cool like episode basically if that was like an Amazon just like stream or something like that. You could even turn like that could be its own mini series, the origin of certain holidays, where it's like an elder is telling this story to like a gathered group of kids or something. And it's like he's the narrator of this story that's taking place. That would be so cool. You got to have a yeah, right. You got to have literary representation. Um I don't think they'd have the gall to steal from a fan, but they certainly wouldn't sanction you publishing it without them agreeing that what you wrote was canon. And so it would have to be like airtight, you know, with the existing lore for them to support that. In my heart, I really believe Blizzard would jump at a community driven like story series, especially if it tied in with the existing lore smoothly. Unfortunately, their lore team has such a turnover. You know, Mike Metzen, he was out for almost like 6 years or something, right? So they just didn't have that continuity to last more than a expansion. Honestly, that's probably my favorite part of the Battle for Azeroth campaign. Going into the Shadowlands campaign, going into the actually Dragonflight came out of nowhere. Battle for Azeroth and Shadowlands, for what it's worth, at least those expansions like tied in together, like really coherently. One led to the other. Dragonflight came out of nowhere. It's just a complete out of left field thing. Oh. Yeah. It certainly feels indefensible most of the time, some of their choices. I've got 251 days played on this character. That's a lot of time for me to reflect on the story, and I've, as much as I want to read the quests, and I've kind of enjoyed the Goblin quest chains this expansion, I've just learned not to... I've learned to accept that I'm not really missing anything by not reading every single quest completely in every single conversation, because I know it doesn't matter. Give it a patch and they'll just retcon the story. Yep. But again, that's why I roleplay, because player stories, at least they're relatively, you know, maybe sometimes they're not very coherent, but they're a little bit more reliable, I would say. The World Tree Teldrassil? You're right, it was only 4 years old. Yeah, that's actually a good point. But WoW launched with like their whole damn city built up into that thing, right? And how many years? It said 10 years have passed since the shattering. Was it 4 years? Because in the WoW 4 years have passed. Interesting. Yeah, an awful lot of shit happens in such a short time in this universe, doesn't it? You know, there were rumors that during the Shadowlands expansion there was going to be like a time skip because time passes differently in the realm of death, and we were supposed to come back to Azeroth like what's apparently was 10 years later, and we were all hoping for like an old world revamp like they did for a few different places. I've got an infinite dragon in my story, but they're not going to do any time travel. He's sort of my convenient plot device for certain things to occur. Well, they have magic, so I would submit that technology would be an inferior thing, right? Like you can just teleport or summon and grow trees that are millions of tons and super fast. Technology would be a lesser race thing. Yeah, well. Why is Orgrimmar still just this empty ass desert? I hate role playing in Orgrimmar. But for whatever reason, everyone comes here. They're coming out with player housing. I expect that's going to be kind of like garrisons where you can only get there if you're invited. They used to do a story circle every Sunday night, and they'd go to Mulgore to Bloodhoof Village around that big bonfire that's there, and they would have impromptu stories where random players would step up and tell a story. And if you had a story for each of the seasons, that would be such a cool like arc for that event. I wonder if they still do that. Hearthstones? Really? I don't know anything about Hearthstone lore. The Hearthstone Sal'journ has is actually a really important plot device. Because as a Death Knight, you know, all the Forsaken and all the Death Knights talk about going home or their families and all that kind of stuff. Well, Sal wants to go home, but as a Tauren, he's so ashamed of what he is, he can't bring himself to do it. And so the whole story is effectively his journey of returning home and his however he ends up doing it. But throughout the story, he always had the ability to go home with his Hearthstone, but he was so afraid of what his mother would think of him, and like his own shame kept him from doing that. And one of the tragic, you know, points in the story, well, I gotta sneeze. One of the tragic points in the story is when once Sal does decide to go home, he like kind of drags his feet to do it. And this is after he betrays the Shadows because they're too ruthless. One of the Shadows betray him and beat him there and like kill his mom and destroy his little his family's like tent setup. So he gets home too late. But then there's a post-credit scene, if you will, of the mom living her life there without her two sons. And there's a whole bunch context you're not getting from this, but two blood elves that he saves use his Hearthstone to escape this execution that they're at. And they appear at the camp, and the mom thinks it's Sal returning home, but she finds it's the blood elves. But they tell her what had happened, and she's actually grateful that Sal's alive. And so the story's kind of got this prodigal son kind of arc to it as well. Interesting. Yeah, pretty much. And that's one of the scenes, because he gets home and he finds like the camp ruined and he finds her body, but the Forsaken that did it is still there, like to gloat. Actually, I've only dabbled in that chapter. I haven't really figured out why she stayed except to gloat. And he goes full Death Knight on her. Like he basically uses his Death Grip to rip her apart. So there's that. That's kind of the angle I was going to go. I wasn't going to have mindless violence where he's just violent for no reason. But when he was violent, I was going to make it really brutal so that it's really intimidating for anyone near him when he finally does let go. It's just an absolute massacre. Oh. Is that a lore thing? Because he does that at one point. He death grips his rune blade back to him. I mean, I think it sounds badass, and it would make sense too because it's a death grip, and it literally is saying it grips life force. Like, look, harness the energy that surrounds and binds all matter. So it's not just life force; it's matter. Okay, but I like that. That would be a cool little detail. Although, you know, because of the Shadowlands, right? No, and that's another element to this story is Sal'journ doesn't want his runeblade. He didn't use swords in his living life, right? He was a druid basically, but he feels compelled to bring this sword around with him, and he knows how to use it from his training and his years of using it. But he doesn't want it. It's sort of like this separate character from him that he kind of is a revulsion towards. But the way runes are used in the Shadowlands expansion, in the Maw, which is effectively hell, the character, the jailer, they imprison people with runes. Like, the runes are a binding thing, at least in the Shadowlands. So in terms of like a prison, a rune prison would be good at neutralizing his runic power. So if you were talking about power scaling and making a Death Knight not a real Death Knight just so that they can operate within this universe, having runes etched into them which bind their strength would be a really good plot device too. Dude, Garrosh's story in Shadowlands was so badass. It was like totally redeemed. To anyone who had any doubts, he totally redeemed himself. He was awesome. One of the better plot points of the whole expansion, honestly. Yeah, when Shadowlands was out, it took a lot of heat because it didn't make any sense and it was completely incoherent, to the extent that even characters in the expansion would say, don't think about that. Like, don't think too hard about what I'm telling you because it's obviously nonsensical. But in hindsight, it was actually a good expansion. I liked the story. I did not like how it ended, though. It ended really unfortunately. Zoval was such a disappointment at the very end. I mean, he was badass right up until you kill him. And then it's like, what are you talking about, dude? Yeah, how he died from Thrall, where he's like, you made me what I am. That was a great scene. And then Thrall, of course, cheated. Okay. Interesting. I think I'm taking the most liberty with this story towards the end, where to defeat the big bad, who's a lich, they have to use a light weapon. And what I was thinking about going with was an artifact that the Scarlet Crusade had summoned through prayer. And it becomes like this uncontrollable source of judgment, basically. And that's something I need to really digest, because it could get hairy if I don't do it right. Interesting. Dialogue is tough, man. It really is. And it's actually tough because you have to get to know the character before you can write their dialogue. And that takes a lot of brain power. The way I started was... Here, I'll show you. I'm on page 36. So this is the very... Right here. This is the very first thing I wrote for Sal'journ, and it was his origin story, or his prelude. It was when he woke up from being Scourge. And then I wrote another chapter of a totally separate situation that was interesting. Rinse and repeat for 2008. Rinse and repeat for... God... over 10 years. Eventually I had so many mini chapters that they weren't connected, but they did show a character progressing. I was like, I'm just going to put these into a full-length narrative and just see what happens. So that's how I got to where I'm at now. So his last name is Deepriver, and I got that name from a Tauren NPC in the Western Plaguelands. This character's name is Mulgris Deepriver, and he's a druid of the Cenarian Circle who's dying in a cabin, and it's a quest chain that players get where they like complete his mission just before he dies, where he's like saving rabbits or something. So in this story, Sal is his brother, and they were both in the Cenarian Circle together when Sal'journ fell and was raised as a Death Knight. They were like deployed with the Cenarian Circle to the Western Plague Lands to or Eastern Plague Lands to stop the Scourge from advancing. Finding the name that is lore accurate, super difficult. For my Infinite Dragon character, coming up with his name, I mean, I won't lie, like I'd ask ChatGPT like what the hell are the rules for making a dragon name? And so it sort of showed me typically how their names end, how their names are translated, and from there I did my best, but a Pandaren last name. Let's see if this guy has one. I'm gonna go with like a verb noun. Yeah, Mistleaf. Or that's like 2 nouns. Mistleaf or like Cinder Brew, or they almost have like almost like a pirate name. There aren't very many Pandaren out right now. Oh, you don't want to do the noun type name? Well, if you can tie it into a facet of their character, like they earned that last name. No. She didn't even bother with a last name on hers. No, man. Pandaren RP are some of the best RPers. I was actually talking about this yesterday to myself, really, but it was like the Pandaren role players, they generally do like shops. Like there was a Pandaren guild that literally ran a restaurant in one of the joints in the Jade Forest where their TRP, this thing here, your character profile, their TRPs literally had a menu and you could order from the menu. Uh, some of them are adventurers. Most of them are like salespeople. Yeah, toxicologists. Yeah, they make alcohol and stuff. No, honestly, they're some of the most fun to roleplay with. You can't do anything with Vulpira. You can't. I haven't really roleplayed with a Drakthir before. I imagine they're just Vulpira players. Tauren are the most fun, I think, just because people who roleplay as Tauren learn their culture a little bit more. Blood Elves are too Game of Thronesy predictable. Your Pandaren would have been provocative. A Pandaren that supported him. Yeah, that would have been sweet. Orc and Goblin role players are some of the best. Like they're so committed to the bit. I actually have a Goblin roleplay friend that I added. He's my in-game lawyer. So if I ever have a problem, I'm just gonna like, hey man, come help me out, be a lawyer. I actually have links turned off. What you got? Uh, if you can try to share it, the link, maybe it just won't show up for other people. This music is way too intense for what I'm writing right now. Nope, it just gave me the 3 stars. Let me see if I can turn that off real quick. What's that guy doing? There you go. Let me try. Oh, nice. That'd be sick. That's a good look. Yeah, the shield's a good pick, too. Love it. Good job. I like a good transmog. For Sal... This is just his, you know, standard Death Knight look, but for his unholy look, bam. Sick. Completely overkill. Yeah, I'd like them. I'd really wish that they would do like different gloves too. We'll see. It feels like it's asking too much from Blizzard to add a little bit of customization. Yeah, the trading post is an unfortunate thing. They could at least hide these items, you know, around the world or make it a random drop chance. But instead, it's just silly. Yet you earn points. Like, on one hand, I get it. You're probably getting more playtime out of people and you earn points and then you can win. You win this mask. But like, I would rather just find the items in the world. That's what made Legion so cool. I flipped my shit when I got my first legendary boots. Volpera look goofy with their helmets on. That is true. I really like the Volpera. I like their background. I like the character model. I like how silly they are. but not in like an obnoxious way. They're just kind of like naive to how violent the world really is. But the way people play them, though, is just like, ugh. These guys are going for it. Well, see, I didn't really play until Wrath. I didn't earn Shadowmourne until well after Wrath. So, like, I have it, but I don't know that that counts. The first epic I earned was the Boots of Agmar or something like that in Legion. And that was just a random drop chance. Nice. That was such a good feeling, right? I was in... Where was I? I was in university with my friends, and we were playing together, and those boots dropped, and it was like, yes. Mm-hmm. Hunters always keep the stuff. My friend played a hunter, and he just took freaking everything. It was like, dude, stop, for real. What I've done in this story is with his Hearthstone. Yeah, Visage form is so cheesy. Just make them a different race. Like, they didn't need their own elf looking face. Like, just make them a different race. That's the whole point of the visages, is to blend in with the races. I don't know. What I'm doing right now is I'm trying to describe Sal trying to hide the glow of his Hearthstone. What I'm doing with the Hearthstone in this story is it's linked to his mother's Hearthstone, and it was given to her children as a way of making them come home. When their runes glow, they know that they're being summoned home, and then they use it and they can go home. Well, in this story, Sal's rune is still glowing. And so the insinuation that the reader will learn later in the story is that his mother's calling him home, but he can't go home because he's a Death Knight and he's ashamed of what he is. And so he uses like mud to pack it into the rune so that he can't see it's glowing. So his Hearthstone's always like kind of dirty. The drag queen vibes is the nice way to put it. There are ways to make the Drakthir, what's the name of it? Visage form. Yeah, you're good. Scars would be cool. Yep. They really just need to steal like the Skyrim character builder. I don't know why WoW doesn't do that. Don't tell me their engine can't handle it. Well, all I'm using is the Mount of Ichero because I'm going for kind of like a ghost vibe or like a spirit vibe. Because he's also got his little ghost dog. Because I'm trying to keep the Tauren aesthetic. Even though he's a Death Knight, he's as Tauren as he is a Death Knight. So I'm trying to keep some level of theme there. In the story, though, Sal's never going to have a mount. He's always going to be walking everywhere. Planes running. Pretty sweet. Yep. I really wish Blizzard would lean into the racial aspects of the game just to make the races a little bit more unique. What has she got? Is that a bell? Well, brother, I'm coming up on my hour here. It's almost done, actually, with this paragraph. And this is going to segue into a totally different conversation about home, and that's going to wrap up the chapter. So, doing good. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up for the night. I appreciate you hanging out. And I also hope that this is sort of motivating you if you have a story that you want to write, that you get working on that. I might be on tomorrow. I think my goal is to start writing on weekends too, just because I think that's a lot of time that I'm not using wisely. So, yeah, brother, thanks for checking in, and we'll see you next time, okay? You guys have a great night and a great weekend if I don't see you. Bye-bye.